What would higher tariffs mean for the average American today? Well, to know that, we have to know what is the definition of a tariff. The simple definition is a tax imposed by one country on goods or services imported from another country. Now let's look at a real example of what that looks like. Let's say there's an American and a Canadian citizen. The Canadian wants to sell the American bottles of their delicious maple syrup, but there's a border in the way. The government would charge the Canadian a tax at the border. That is essentially what a tariff is. Now, if we look at the history of tariffs, the first tariff was put in place by George Washington back in 1789. The rate was about 5% on most imported goods. Now, if we look at tariffs as a percentage of the U.S. government's revenue over time, it has gradually gone down from 66% during the Civil War to 33% during World War I, down to about 1% today. So it doesn't make up a whole lot of the U.S. government's revenue. And over time, the tariff as percentage of rate has gone down for the United States. So to really know what this means, we have to look at the pros and cons. The pros are it promotes domestic trade and production. The cons are it can easily lead to what we call a silent tax. Now, the most recent example of a tariff working in the United States is the tire tariff. When Obama was president, he implemented a tariff on all Chinese tires to protect the young and struggling American tire industry. So for all you visual learners, basically, this is what was happening. The American tire industry was producing tires at a cost of $2 to the consumer, but the Chinese tire industry was producing tires at $1. Now, naturally, the consumer would buy from China instead of America because it was cheaper. But under Obama's tariffs, that made Chinese tires more expensive to import and buy for the average American customer. So now, essentially, Chinese tires costed $3 versus the American tires $2. So over time, the U.S. tire industry boomed, but that wasn't without consequences. Now, if we look on the flip side, there is some downside to some tariffs. Typically, how that looks is foreign-reliant industries have their prices go up over time. And typically, when a business's prices go up, they pass that price increase on to the consumers, which is, this case, the average American. If you look at the tire example, let's say Ford was buying Chinese tires before the tariff to build and produce their cars. In this hypothetical example, let's say the cars costed $5 with the price of $1 tires from China. Under the tire example, after Obama's tariffs were enacted, Ford would still have to buy tires, but instead it'd be cheaper to buy American tires at $2 a tire to make the same car, but the price for the same car would go up by $1 because the other costs stayed fixed, but their tire cost went up. Over time, the tire price in the U.S. looked cheaper than China, but the consumers did not know they were paying the quote-unquote invisible tax caused by the tariff. So in the end, the customer ends up paying more for the domestic goods. Now, let's look at what Trump's proposed tariffs could do to the American economy. For those who don't know, Trump has proposed a 60 to 100% tariff on all goods imported from China and around a 10 to 20% tariff on all goods imported from the rest of the world. Now, practically, this is something that it could affect. China is a major producer of many household items in America, such as clothing and electronics. Currently, the U.S. does not have the manufacturing infrastructure capable to replace Chinese manufacturing. It would take the U.S. many years to be able to build the factories needed to produce the same goods we're currently buying from China at somewhat of the same cost. That is, even if American manufacturing wants to replace the goods bought from China. Most economists currently agree that Trump's proposed tariffs would increase costs for the average American household. Some even say by up to $2,600 per year. What do you think about tariffs? Do you think Trump's policies are good? Feel free to follow us on Sketch Economics for more videos covering everyday economics on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok.